majestically and kicks the goal. Making something out of nothing.
Malchesky, is that the grand final?
Jimmy Bartell can make a hero of himself.
That is a brilliant snap. He's kicked the goal and Fremantle win it after the siren. What a game of football at the MCG.
Welcome to the Protected Zone. This is an all AFL area where we talk about all the important issues in the great game of AFL. We're podcasting on iTunes, and you can also listen to us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and on our fast-growing website, theprotectedzone.com. And in this episode, we'll be going through all the big games from round 17.
And there are plenty, and we'll also look at what makes a good coach.
We'll also be talking about unsociable football. Is Melbourne the new Hawthorn?
Yeah, and we make our grand predictions for grand finalists, Brownlow and Coleman, and Premiership favourite.
And we look at a new team song for Fremantle.
And our preview of the big games in round 18.
So it's all happening in this big 2017 season. So where has it all gone? We're already up to round 18.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've got only, 6 games left in the regular season. And we are finally seeing some kind of shape. After 18 games, we started seeing the favourites winning and unfavourites losing. That kind of sort of predictability is coming back into sort of normal. Normality is returning to the games, which, to some people is not very good. We want to see more sort of last 2-minute nail-biters and cliffhangers and boilovers and stuff. But we started seeing sort of predictable results now, don't you think, Eddie?
I think we did start to see some more predictable results, but I disagree with you when you say that there weren't too many cliffhangers, because there was a fantastic cliffhanger on Saturday. It was the game between Geelong and Hawthorn.
Yes, that was, wasn't it? And not much, was on stake because, as we said, Hawthorn was already out of the season. They've got the mathematical chance. They could have won the game.
Yes, they could have won the game. Isaac Smith had a shot on goal in the final couple of seconds of the game, and he kicked, instead of a goal, he kicked a behind. So they lost by 3 points, Hawthorn, but it was an old-fashioned classic.
Yes, it was. And that wasn't the first time Isaac Smith did a similar thing. It was the second time, wasn't it?
Yes, last year in the qualifying final between Geelong and Hawthorn, he had a shot after the siren, and if he kicked a goal, he would have won the game for Hawthorn, but he missed and they lost by 3 points. So a similar result as last year, but better luck next time. But that wasn't the only fantastic match of round 17. There was another one which I thought was an exceptional match, and it was the one between the Greater Western Sydney and the Sydney Swans, also known as the Battle of the Bridge.
And which bridge won?
It was the Hen and Chicken Bay Bridge, as we discussed last week, and a lot of people said, well, it wasn't such a great game, but as far as I'm concerned, it was very close, it was tense, the stakes were very high. It was like a fast-moving game of chess.
And it was a bit disappointing that GWS Giants didn't have, or had to scratch Jeremy Cameron, who was apparently injured.
Yes, that was a great disappointment, but for me the biggest disappointment was that Greater Western Sydney, they were going for 3 draws in a row. They didn't achieve that. That was very disappointing.
Yes, they got close though at one stage. The Swans led the game almost throughout with that sort of winning margin, 2 goals or thereabouts all the way through. And I thought, if Jeremy Cameron had been playing, he could have easily managed to kick those 2 and could have been closer, and the sort of result we all wanted might have eventuated. But without him, the Giants were 1 player down, I reckon.
The Gold Coast against Collingwood game, a lot of people thought that was a game that didn't have very high stakes, but for me it was a brilliant match. It was played in torrential downpour, and the skill that was involved there was fantastic, and it was a reasonably high score as well, considering the amount of rain that was bucketing down on the ground.
Yes, it's rare to see those, games these days. It was a sort of another classic sort of AFL games. You know, we play in snow, hail, rain, whatever condition. And another game was played in Darwin, hard, dry condition. It's unlike, sort of baseball or cricket. The weather, harsh condition, wet weather is a part of the game. And as you said, Eddie, it was a good example of, who can play that sort of wet leather.
I totally agree with you. So there were some high-quality matches in round 17, but there were also a few fizzers. I don't like to admit this, but the Friday Night Lights game, the one between St Kilda and Essendon, this is quite an amazing game because St Kilda, they thrashed Richmond the week before and then they were thrashed themselves by Essendon this weekend. How can a team be so up and then so down?
Exactly. I was quite looking forward to this game Friday night. It turned out to be a fizzer. As you said, Eddie, in previous weeks, St Kilda, by half time, they kicked 14 goals. But this week, the Saints managed only 2 goals, 6. And Essendon, in the meantime, kicked 6-10. Yes, the form reversal was just incredible. You have to accept that football is played against opposition in front of you. So, you could say that Richmond was so horrible or Essendon was so good. Or St Kilda might have fielded the wrong team. The game itself was a bit boring, so I started flicking through the good old-fashioned records. And I realised St Kilda has got so many players with their given names starting with J. Now, what's this?
Yeah, so unfortunately the game was such a fizzer that they're the sort of things that we had to do to amuse ourselves, just find out how many players are called Jack, last week we decided to look at how many players are called Jake, this week it's Jack. Who knows what it's going to be next week? I think we'll just have to wait for the next fizzer. But speaking of fizzers, there was another fizzer on the weekend as well, and it was the match between Fremantle and West Coast, the Western Derby or Derby, and to get the crowd into the stadium, they were selling pies at half price.
Half price being what? Are they selling sort of $3 or something at the ground? So you get one for $1.50?
No, what they were doing was it was a bit of a gimmick because they realised that the crowd numbers were not going to be so high, so they thought that they'd announce this marketing gimmick called 1995 pie prices. And I thought, well, that must be pretty cheap. But then they announced that the pies are going to be $3, which is actually pretty expensive. And the normal price is $5.80 for a pie. So that's really, really expensive. But the strategy didn't end up working. They only ended up getting around 34,000 people to the crowd. And the game was such a fizzer that the pie was the best player on the ground. That's how bad the match was.
Yes, and even none of the Collingwood discards former pies were playing for either team. That's very strange.
So, Lin Tang, what makes a good coach in this contemporary game of AFL?
It is a good question, Eddie, because at least 3 current coaches, their positions are under close scrutiny. Collingwood's Nathan Buckley, Scott at North Melbourne, and Rodney Eade at Gold Coast. Their positions are, every week, after every game, their positions, being questioned. So we should look into, what makes a good coach. That is a very valid point. And we found this kind of leaked document. And this comes from what he claims to be a former scout for an AFL club.
Now, when you say there was a leaked document from a scout, now was it a scout for a player or a scout for a coach? Or both?
Oh, that's a good question. Presumably he was working for a club, so he was a scout looking for the players, I think.
So what should they actually be looking for? Should they be looking for more of a people person as far as a coach is concerned, a player developer, a skilled coach, or all of the above? Should they be a control freak or a little bit more liberal?
According to him, the first quality a good coach should have is a clear vision. And then the second is ability to teach and reinforce the vision. Then the third point is investment in people. Number 4, a strategic mind with mental agility. Number 5, unflappable temperaments. Number 6, the ability to understand how important it is to have a good team around you. Number 7, high standards for little things. Number 8, instinctive competitiveness.
So that's quite an interesting list there, and I thought you were actually giving the job description for the Prime Minister. Should we send that list off to the Prime Minister? Maybe he'll do a much better job than he's currently doing. But these are all of the good things that we need to look for in a good coach. But is such a coach out there? Are they available? Who would be available to take on Collingwood, Gold Coast or North Melbourne?
Yeah. And this allegedly former scout said, Carlton's doing well, and of course Hawthorn. Clarkson's doing well. There are, those around. And according to him, Collingwood's Nathan Buckley's not doing too bad a job as a senior coach, but he failed, apparently, this number 6 to have a good team so that Collingwood can field a good team. According to him, Nathan Buckley has got too many yes men around him, and he hasn't got good footy department.
Well, in my opinion, Nathan Buckley is an excellent coach, except for one problem, that he's not winning the game. So,
yeah, that's because he hasn't got good team to have a good team.
Yeah, so these are the things that the coaching scouts will be looking for, and as we've mentioned quite a few times this year, Collingwood, Gold Coast and North Melbourne, they should all be looking for new coaches at the end of the year, and we'll find out who those people are going to be. Unsociable football. Lin Tang, what do you know about this?
I don't know, but when I was watching a game over the weekend, I think it was Adelaide playing Melbourne, and I think that was mentioned during the game that Melbourne's playing what is termed as unsociable footy. Now, it means that they are extra physical. Yes, I've noticed Melbourne's been extra physical or a bit over the top. They seem to be playing something other than the football. Sometimes, you think they're playing the game of boxing or a game of wrestling or mud wrestling sometimes.
Well, I did do some research into unsociable football, and I discovered that it was actually first used by Hawthorn in the early 2000s. And this is during a time when they weren't playing so well. They were not a great team, and then they thought, well, we need to muscle up a little bit, and then they started smacking people, punching people, elbowing. Didn't do them any good at that point, and then the next time that we heard about unsociable football was in 2005, when Brisbane players, namely Brad Scott and Chris Scott, who are now coaching Geelong and North Melbourne, they targeted Nick Riewoldt, who is surprisingly still playing 12 years later, when he had a broken collarbone. So Nick Riewoldt was still on the ground, he had a broken collarbone, and the Scott brothers were targeting him. And I guess when they talk about targeting, they were nudging him, trying to push him in the collarbone and things like that, and it wasn't a good look for the game.
Yes, some people like that sort of physical aspects of the football game. And Melbourne certainly played this year so far that kind of game. Do you think that sort of unsociable footy or whatever it's called, is the tactics working?
Well, it didn't work for Hawthorn when they first brought it in I believe it was in the 2002 season, and they were also Rans for a few years, and it was only until Alastair Clarkson took over in 2005 that they started developing a little bit. So who knows, maybe this unsociable football, it takes a while to develop. And I must point out that Brisbane, when they introduced their idea of unsociable football in 2005, well, they've only made the finals once over the past 13 seasons. So it's hard to know whether it will be successful or not, but I guess what Melbourne are trying to do is copy the whole Hawthorn Football Club system of playing football. And if they win 3 premierships in a row over the next 5 years, then we'll say that it's been a success.
Yes, it was maybe natural for former Hawthorn champion Jason Dunstall, who is now working in the media. He thinks it's a good idea, and kind of encouraging Melbourne to keep on doing this, just with the right balance. And as you said, they could turn into a next Hawthorn. That sort of physicality is required.
So we've completed round 17, and that means that every team has played 16 games, which also means that there are 6 more games to go in the home and away season, which also means that we're closer to the end of the season than we are to the beginning of the season. So I think it's about time we need to start talking about predictions.
Predictions! Yes, we did that way back about 4 months ago.
Yes, and we'll do a special episode towards the end of the season comparing our predictions at the beginning of the season, our predictions after round 17, and what actually happens at the end of the season. So that should be quite an exciting program. It's
still very difficult to predict who's going to be in the finals. Top 4 seems to be sort of solidifying. Adelaide, Geelong, and the GWS, maybe Port, maybe Richmond. Those teams will make top 4. And Sydney's surging ahead into, finals action. I think they are red hot or red white hot. So they'll be playing significant parts in September, no doubt. And the Melbourne we talked about, they're about. And Essendon's still got a chance. The Saints are still there.
Well, they've still got a chance, but my bold prediction is that after 16 games, round 17, that the top 8 is not going to change. Now, over the past 7 or 8 seasons, the top 8 hasn't changed at all after round 16. So,
but this is an odd year.
I realise that this is an odd year, this evenness year, but I know that it's a bold prediction, but there was something that happened in the last round where we were just starting to get a flavour of what the rest of the season is going to be like, where the pretenders are dropping off and things are starting to become a little bit more normal.
Okay, we'll see what it turns out to be.
Now on to the Brownlow medal.
Right, it was a bit of discussion this week after Dustin Martin of Richmond was seen to be punching the opposition Brisbane player, and he was actually got off. He wasn't suspended, so his chance of winning Brownlow is still alive. And also in the Geelong's game against their classic match against Hawthorn, Patrick Dangerfield, he was severely injured, even though he played out the whole game. But those 2 players are hot favourites, aren't they?
Yes, Dustin Martin from Richmond and Patrick Dangerfield from Geelong. There's possibly a few underdogs within this race, but I think it's either going to be one of those 2. And you never know, something might happen in the final 6 rounds, but there's still a long way to go there. The Coleman medal, that's awarded to the player that kicks the most goals during the home and away season. At the moment, it's Lance Franklin that's leading the pack from the Sydney Swans. And then it's Joe Danaher from Essendon.
Yes, that's interesting. And it was I've noticed, I was checking out the stats just before this podcast. They're not kicking many goals, even though AFL, the league, wanted to make the games more sort of goal-friendly or, more fireworks. What happened to that?
Well, I think it's just that it doesn't matter which way you change the rules, the coaches are going to work out a way of making the game a little bit more defensive. So I think they've just reverted to form, the coaches. They prefer strong defence rather than attacking football, and that's what's happened. So we've done the Brownlow and the Coleman medal. Then we look at the favourite for the whole competition. Adelaide is on top of the ladder. Should we look at the team that's on top of the ladder as the flag favourite?
Well, that's debatable, isn't it? You know, just last year we saw the 7th place, the Western, went all the way to win the flag. At the end of home and away seasons is just a minor indication. Minor premier doesn't necessarily end up as a major premier.
Yes, well, at the moment, Melbourne is sitting in 7th position on the ladder, so should they be the flag favourites?
The way they are playing, I doubt it. And if there was anyone coming from outside top 4, I think it's safe to say Sydney Swans. But Swans may have peaked too early. They would like to have this kind of form in September, but it's only, July? So 2 months out of sort of sync. And God knows, West Coast may sneak into a top 8 and they might regain form suddenly using this reverse psychology. And they may be winning 7 games in a row in September.
Well, I think in this special 2017 season, which has been so even and unpredictable, and even though I just said that we're probably reverting to form as far as a standard AFL season is concerned, maybe we should wait until three-quarter time on grand final day before we make our final predictions.
Indeed, and I'd say West Coast may win 8 games in September.
So this is The Protected Zone. We're podcasting on iTunes. You can listen to us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and on our website, theprotectedzone.com. Next up, the team song for Fremantle. Our regular listeners would know that each week we give an AFL team a brand new team song, and we've done 17 so far, which means that we've got one left, and this week it's a new team song for Fremantle.
Hey, that's the way to go.
And what can you tell me about the Fremantle team song at the moment?
I'm a bit confused. I was just refreshing my memory because they haven't won too many games this year, and I haven't heard their songs. Oh, what was their song? And I found a sort of different versions, or older version as they call it, that had great Russian composer Stravinsky's bit.
Oh yes, good old Igor Stravinsky.
The lyrics don't make any sense. I mean, normally those team songs, especially sung by the players after their win, you don't understand what they're singing about. It always sounds like wah, 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 wah. But the Fremantle ones, just so hard to detect. What are they saying? Frio way to go. So Frio Hevo Ho or something.
And the way to go, but where are they going?
Exactly, go where? It's like a bit like Australian anthem, isn't it? Advance where?
Well, at least the Fremantle Dockers are not girt by sea, but maybe they are. But let's listen to the Fremantle Dockers team song. It's an interesting song. I'm just not too sure what to think about it, but I've heard that there was an attempt to change it at the end of the 2011 season.
Apparently, yes. In the public sort of campaign, Fremantle obviously Fremantle Dockers thought, well, we have got problems. They had one song, but they deleted bits in 2010. And then the 2011, they still thought, there was a bit of problem. So they went to the public with 4 options and asked their opinions. And those 4 options, one of them was an original song composed by the Australian band Eskimo Joe. who's the big fan of Fremantle Dockers.
Not only are Eskimo Joe Australian, but they're also from Perth. So why didn't they choose their song?
I don't know. The people didn't like that. But it's not too bad. Can we have a listen to that one too?
Yes, let's listen to Eskimo Joe.
From the sea to the shore, hear the roaring. We will fight for the pride and the glory. Free-o, 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 free-o. In the purple and the white, we will always win the fight. We are Dockers, we are making history. And as the cup goes up, hear the shouting. Free-o, free-o.
So yeah, that's actually not a bad song. But my research shows that at the end of the 2011 season, that Fremantle had a bit of an existential crisis, and they decided to change their playing jumper. They decided to change the way that they looked, everything about them, and that's why they looked at changing their team song. They decided to get rid of the anchor on their jumper because they thought, well, that's actually slowing us down. That's bringing us all down with the weight of the anchor, and it seems like the team song survived.
Yes, if you leave it to the public, they stick to the sort of what it is, conservative they are, but people are conservative, and if they're used to what they're given, they grow up with, you don't want to change those. If you ask Essendon fans, do you want to get rid of red and black and choose the orange and purple? They would say, no, we are red and black.
Well, we're giving the Fremantle Dockers team song the big heave-ho, and we'll reveal their new team song at the end of our program. Next up, our Round 18 previews. Round 18, it looks like it's going to be another big round, and as I mentioned before, we're closer to the end of the season than we are to the beginning. So what sort of things do you think we'll see in round 18?
Well, the winners will be winners and the losers will be losers, and the best, last week's Friday night match was a fizzer, it turned out to be, but this week I think it's going to be a dress rehearsal, could be a dress rehearsal for the this year's grand final. Adelaide playing Geelong.
Well, that should be a very, very big match. Now, you did say that it could be a dress rehearsal for the grand final, which I suspect you mean that those two teams will play in the grand final. Doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a good game, but I agree, these two teams are the ones that possibly could play in the grand final this year, so it's a very, very big match. These are the top two teams at the moment.
Yes, and Geelong have been lucky. They escaped a few narrow shaves over the last month or so. And Adelaide are coming into form. Unless they're in form, they wouldn't be at the top of the ladder to start with. But the way they handled Melbourne last week was just so professional, even though they were provoked by the unsociables.
Yes, and it seems like we did have the catch cry before that if you stop Rory Sloane and you stop Taylor Walker, you stop Adelaide as well. So that's a bit of a long catch cry, but it seems like even if that's happening, Adelaide are finding out a way to win.
Yes, they now they have got the new game plan in that not just text at the goal mouth or playing forward brilliantly. But they have got the multi-pronged forward line. Last week Walker kicked 4, of course, but Tom Lynch was brilliant, kicking 3. Mitch McGovern, he kicked 2, and of course Eddie Betts, he sneaked in 2. So all of them contributing.
So another big match on the weekend is Richmond against Greater Western Sydney. Now, importantly for Greater Western Sydney, this game is being played at the MCG, the home of football. Greater Western Sydney have only won 1 game out of 10 at the MCG.
Yes, it's a kind of dress rehearsal for them, isn't it? I mean, unless they're used to playing there, there's no point playing getting into September.
Well, that's exactly right, but Surely all grounds are the same because they've got goalposts at either end and it's an oval. So why should playing at the MCG make any difference? If they lose all of their games at the MCG and then suddenly find themselves in the grand final, why should that make a big difference?
I think it's more psychological, and I don't think GWS players don't like travelling very much. I think for a change they should catch a sleeper train travelling from Sydney to Melbourne instead of flying, and they should bond on the train, spend the whole night together, whole team. That may work. But some teams, as you said, don't travel very well.
Well, I'm picking Richmond to win this game because Greater Western Sydney, although they've been travelling reasonably well, over the past 4 or 5 weeks they've been lacking a little bit, maybe lacking a bit of intensity. And because it's at the home of football, I think they might be overawed by the occasion and they should go down to Richmond.
Yes, it is a very, very, very important game. But as you pointed out, GWS Giants hasn't had a win for last, 3 weeks? So they need to win this game. On the other hand, Richmond has been playing, ugly football, but they've got the result. I'll go with Richmond.
Another interesting game is Collingwood against the West Coast Eagles. Collingwood and West Coast Eagles always seem to play a good match. And a few weeks ago we said that West Coast was trying out a new reverse psychology where they start losing at the House of Pain at Subiaco Oval and in anticipation of winning away from Subiaco Oval. This game is being played at Melbourne.
Yes, Eagles have been working on that psychology and the Battle of Birds. Collingwood are not much their own to play for other than saving bucks. Some people have started this public campaign, Save the Bucks, like Save Environment kind of, tone. And Collingwood haven't got much to play for. On the other hand, the Eagles, the other bird, have got a lot to play for. They're just clinging on to top 8 at the moment. And if they lose this one, the season may be fading out. So it is a very interesting match, and I'll go for West Coast.
I'm going to go for Collingwood in this game. So let's get on with all the other matches. We'll just have a look at the quick tips for these games. Essendon against North Melbourne.
Yes, that's going to be an interesting match. North Melbourne, they're master of, conjuring up the honourable losses.
No, they're getting into the dishonourable losses now, and I think the season has completely fallen apart for North Melbourne. So Essendon should win this game quite easily.
I like the way the Bombers go around this year, and I would go for Essendon.
Melbourne against Port Adelaide. Melbourne, the unsociable team of 2017, against Port Adelaide, who are the new flat track bullies.
Yes, who's going to be bully out? It's like comparing certain parts of your body. Males often do. I'm stronger than you. No, I'm that kind of competition.
Well, I'll go for Port Adelaide.
Yes, I'm going for Port.
Western Bulldogs against Gold Coast. It's being played in Melbourne. Western Bulldogs went on to the winners list again last week. Gold Coast were not on that winners list. What can we expect to see?
Even though Gold Coast didn't win last week, but I like the way they went about. Gary Ablett Jr. was brilliant. He was very good in the final quarter, and I was impressed by the Gold Coast ruckman Gerard Witts maturing into a proper ruck.
Well, I think Western Bulldogs will win this game.
I'll go for the Gold Coast.
Saturday night match, it's Sydney against St Kilda.
Yes, the question is, can Sydney keep on winning and all the way to the last Saturday of September?
That's a very interesting point, but they are the form team at the moment. They've won their last 9 out of 10 games, and that's pretty damn good. St Kilda have won their last 4 out of 5 games. They had a shocking result last weekend. The match is being played at the Sydney Cricket Ground. That's the home ground for the Sydney Swans. I'm going for Sydney.
So I'll go for St Kilda.
This is the rematch of the 2013 Grand Final. It's Fremantle against Hawthorn being played at Subiaco Oval, one of the final games ever to be played at the ground.
Yes, I remember that game, the 2013 Grand Final, because I was calling the game in Japanese, that game between Fremantle and Hawthorn. And I do remember that game was won by Hawthorn.
Yes, it was. So will Fremantle turn the tables on Hawthorn?
Well, Hawthorn's in sort of mini form at the moment. I mean, the game they played against Geelong last week was, classic. So they've got, they've got the team that is very well motivated, and they could win.
Well, both teams have got nothing to lose except for the game itself. I'm going to choose Fremantle.
Yeah, I go for Hawthorn.
And the final game of the round is Brisbane against Carlton. We do like to see records in the game, and I think this could be the lowest attendance for the season.
Yes, sort of who's going to... It's a reverse sort of psychology or reverse physicality at work. But I'm quite impressed by the way Brisbane Lions are playing. And Carlton's impressive too. I think they will, both teams will be playing much better next year. But we're talking about this weekend.
I think that Brisbane will win this game.
I'll go for Brisbane.
So there you go. They're all of our tips for round 18. You've been listening to The Protected Zone. We're podcasting on iTunes. You can listen to us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and on our website, theprotectedzone.com. And the end of the season is getting closer, and we're going to go out with a new team song for Fremantle.
And it's a great Australian band. Is it a good old Painters and Dockers?
Yes, and here we go. Let's listen to the song. It's a good one, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, see you around next week.